My name is Sam Baltrusis. I'm the author of 7 historical-based ghost books, including 13 Most Haunted in Massachusetts and Ghosts of Salem, Haunts of the Witch City. During the day, I'm an author and journalist. At night, I moonlight as a paranormal researcher and write about the state's haunted happenings. I dig deep for the skeletal secrets buried beneath the Bay State's blood-stained soil. When it comes to crime, Massachusetts has its secrets. Dark secrets. Tales of murder, mayhem, and madness that happened over a 300-year period. For the next half hour, we'll take a haunted train ride beyond Boston, from the bloody fingerprints left at the Metropolitan State Asylum in Waltham, to the haunting legacy of Lizzie, Borden, and Fall River. This is the 13 Most Haunted Crime Scenes Beyond Boston. Welcome to my nightmare. Hello and welcome to the 13 Most Haunted Crime Scenes Beyond Boston. My name is Sam Baltrusis. I'm the author of 7 historical-based ghost books, including the upcoming 13 Most Haunted book. Joining me is my lovely co-host, Sharon Filia. Hello, Sharon. How are you? Well, Sharon actually did a report on the USS Salem, which is an extremely haunted location, and she really hasn't been the same since. So, Sharon, tell me about your experiences on the USS Salem. Okay. I have a trick here. Sharon loves chocolate. Coming in at number 13, Riverside Cemetery in Barre, Mass. As we stepped into the burying ground, it was apparent that something bad once happened there. Colebrook Springs was once a bustling town with 2 hotels and nearly 35 houses. It was all removed in the 1930s as part of the area's reservoir project. Besides a few foundations, the cemetery is virtually all that remains. We walked the grounds, taking in the mixture of old and new headstones. Birds chirped in the distance as the wind rustled through the tops of the tall pines. At the back of the cemetery, we found a monument to the Narramore children. They were all killed by their own mother in 1901. Author Joni Mayhan gives us the sad but true details behind our 13th most haunted crime scene.
Hi, I'm Joni Mayhan. I'm a paranormal investigator and the author of 15 paranormal books, including Bones in the Basement and Signs of Spirits. This is Riverside Cemetery, and it's located in Barre, Massachusetts. It is a very old cemetery. It was built back during the days when Colebrook Village was in operation, and that was an old, established, bustling town that was eventually torn down when the Quabbin Reservoir was built. It was part of the watershed program, so they needed to remove the town. So all that remains now are a lot of empty, abandoned roads and this cemetery. Well, because there is a grave located here that pays tribute to the Narramore children who were murdered by their own mother. When she couldn't make ends meet, she felt that her children were going to be taken away from her, so she killed them one by one instead of allowing that to happen. And in retrospect, a lot of child laws were created to protect children due to that case. So it did end up being helpful for other children, but just so tragic for the children who lost their lives.
Hi, Mike.
Hi, how are you?
Great. So Mike is part of Para Boston. He's a major contributor to most of my books, including the upcoming 13 Most Haunted Crime Scenes. So regards to number 13, which is the Riverside Cemetery in Barre, Mass. Any experience with that cemetery?
Mostly with tales that I've heard about it. I mean, people seeing shadows and figures in that cemetery, whispers and voices, and specifically around the tombstone, the Navarre tombstone.
Yeah, and the children that were murdered. So there's a sad story. But do you think, like, from your experience, that cemeteries are haunted?
Well, I've done a lot of research and statistical analysis of this, and I found that cemeteries themselves only represent about 13% of all hauntings in Massachusetts, at least of the 175 that I've surveyed. And funny enough, out of 519 cemeteries in Massachusetts, they only represent 5% of those. So it's a very small number. There's not a lot of argument for a cemetery being haunted.
My thoughts are with cemeteries, I kind of agree with Mike. I think that a lot of people go to cemeteries for hauntings, but my theory is that perhaps the spirits are just visiting and they may stop by and then leave the cemetery, but they're not bound at the location.
You think about it, a lot of the people who are buried in cemeteries may have never visited that cemetery while they were alive, so why would they choose to hang out there if they're going to do that, right?
Exactly. So number 12 on our list is Dogtown. Dogtown is in Gloucester. It is a ghost town. There's a lot of interesting history there. My thoughts are that there was a contemporary murder that happened there. Now, do you feel like that murders, do they leave a psychic imprint on a location based on your experience?
Well, I haven't seen a lot in the way of trends with that. I mean, murders and hauntings only represent about 14%. In other words, of all the 175 that I studied, only 14% of them had a murder background. And the others had, 50% had a genuine, just casual death background. So I don't think there's really anything specifically, but if there is an argument to be made about the high emotional content that is surrounded with murders. I mean, you think about what's going on in both people's mind at the time, both the murderer and the victim. If you had something along the lines of an area being charged by a sudden death or a very traumatic experience, most of the highways would be haunted when they get into accidents, or hospitals would be overwhelmingly haunted because there's a lot of tragedy there as well. It's hard to say. I mean, I don't know all the answers, but I haven't seen the trend pointing that murders help out or not. But that's why we're still researching, because we don't have the answer.
I'm interested in that specifically. A lot of these locations, people expect them to be haunted,
yes,
like the Lizzie Borden house or the Houghton mansion. Based on your experience, do you feel like that perhaps these locations, people are bringing their own stuff with them? When I say stuff, it could be their ghost or their energy to a location. They're expecting it to be haunted, and then it becomes haunted.
I think that you hit it on the head. I think that what happens is I've seen a lot of locations where they have no real haunted history until they get publicized or something of that nature, and they bring in a lot of people to investigate because it's popular. The people bring in their own expectations and their own perceived perceptions of what's going on in that environment, and maybe they're bringing things with them to possibly charge the area, who knows. But I think they do bring in their own information. That's why, in science we look at a thing that's the Heisenberg principle. Anything you study, you also change. And I think we see a lot of that in these types of places, because traditionally in literature, as you know, hauntings and ghosts really go together very well. So people, when they hear of a murder or a location like that, they bring those expectations of hauntings, and they kind of leave them there either through perception or some other means as well.
So speaking of expectations, number 11 on our list is Old Salem Jail, which is it's been converted into a burger restaurant, and there's also posh condos as well.
So I've eaten there. Yeah,
it's called Bit Bar Salem. So, I feel that, well, first of all, there's a cemetery, Howard Street Cemetery, right next to it. Any thoughts on any? Have you heard any stories from the people that live in the condos?
Nothing from the condo people, but I know that when I was first starting out in this, that was one of the places that we'd go. I mean, people would claim that they'd see lights and see shadows inside that building before they renovated it. And you think about that particular story of that jail, it's very interesting. It was one of the oldest jails in the country, operating jails in the country up until like the 90s. And they didn't have proper plumbing, I believe, for all of the cells. And there was a lot of tragedy there. So who knows what's going on? I would love to speak with the people that are living in the condos now, because I'm very interested to see if they're experiencing anything.
Well, the conditions in the jail were horrific, as you were alluding to. And also right next to it is the Howard Street Cemetery, which is where Giles Corey was pressed to death over a 3-day period. And to give you an idea, Giles Corey this is in 1692 during the witch trials hysteria. Giles Corey he didn't plead guilty or not guilty to being a witch. He was stripped naked, a board board was put on top of him, rocks were put on top of the boards, and he was pressed for a long time. And he actually was very stubborn and never said whether he was guilty or not guilty. According to legend, he said, more weight, which is probably not true because his lungs were, there's a board on top of his, on his lungs. But with that said, something like that could leave, in my opinion, leave a psychic imprint on the location. And there's been reports of seeing like a crowd of people around the area, kind of like a Puritan garb, and perhaps it has left its imprint on the location. But like you said before, there's no proof to that. It's more anecdotal conjecture.
What I always wonder is when you hear of stories like this of a tragic event such as Giles Corey, why are we seeing the crowd and not him?
Right.
You know, if it is that particular thing. I mean, it's a traumatic moment, I suppose, for the witnesses as well as the people that are going through it.
Yeah.
But you have to give Giles the credit here that he's experiencing the most turmoil. So you'd think he would come back.
Well, according to legend, Giles Corey, if you see his apparition, something bad will happen to Salem or to yourself. And
yeah, and people say they've seen him around Salem. So,
yeah. And what does he look like?
Right. That's a good question. Would you recognize him if you saw him?
So our next on our list is number 10 is Harvard University. And there's been a lot of murders on Harvard's campus over the years. There was one murder that happened fairly recently. And there was we don't really talk about this. This is actually not in my book, 13 Most Haunted Crime Scenes. But there was a horrific murder that happened in the Lowell house, and where one student stabbed the other student and then committed suicide. So you're saying, based on your research, there's no proof that something like that would leave a psychic imprint on that location?
There's just no evidence of it. I mean, I can't say that it doesn't happen, but because I don't have evidence of that either.
Right.
But I don't have any. I deal with statistics in the research that I do, and I like to look for patterns, and so we try to look at different cases that all have the same kind of criteria and see if there's a pattern. Because if you get a big enough sample, you're going to find patterns in statistics that may point you in the right direction. We just don't have evidence that that's happening. I would like it to. I wish it would, but I got to go by connect the dots from the question to the results, and so I can't. Other people have opinion. You have your opinion, and that's all great. But I can't say that that's happening for sure.
But there's one location that is number 8 on our list, and that is Metropolitan State Hospital. And Metropolitan State Hospital, MedState, that's where the Hospital of the Seven Teeth.
Right, yes.
Yeah, and it is, you've done some investigating there, right?
We have, yeah, and we had some interesting results there. The building, we investigated one of the older buildings that still remain, not the administrative building, but one of the other ones, and it's actually a cable access place now. We spent the evening in there. We set up some remote microphones and listening devices, and we actually could hear children singing "Ring Around the Rosie" from the room that was above, and that was where the children's gymnasium was, which was very interesting that it happened to be situated there, that we were hearing these things. So it's very interesting. Yeah, I'd love to get back in there. I wish I was there before they tore down some of the other original buildings. I would have loved to have been in those.
So we're going to roll a clip on the Metropolitan State Hospital. Thank you so much, Mike, for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Inspiration for American Horror Stories Asylum? Coming in at number 8 is the Metropolitan State Hospital in Waltham. I don't do asylums, but here I am, walking through what's known as the Hospital of the Seven Teeth. The former psychiatric facility opened in 1930 and quickly earned a not-so-stellar reputation for its sadistic, overcrowded conditions. The hospital's children's center, for example, reportedly medicated the young ones to an extreme, resulted in multiple fatalities. These ghost children reportedly sing "Ring Around the Rosie" in the afterlife. And then there was the heinous Hospital of the Seven Teeth homicide. In 1978, Anna Marie Davey was murdered by co-patient Melvin Wilson. He dismembered her body and buried pieces of the corpse in several shallow graves scattered in the grounds of MedState. Wilson also kept 7 of Davies' teeth, which he tucked away as sociopathic souvenirs. Yes, MedState's bloodstains also left a psychic imprint.
Welcome back to 13 Most Haunted Crime Scenes Beyond Boston. Again, I'm Sam Baltrusis, author of 7 historical-based ghost books. Joining me are my good friends, Cassie, Tina, and Rachel. Welcome. So, getting back to the list, the 13 Most Haunted list, so we're going to, the next one is Hawthorne Cove Marina. That's in Salem. It is a barge that was converted. There was a horrific murder on the barge, and it's been converted into a marina. Have you, based on experiences like with something that's been converted, do the ghosts follow the location?
I think so.
Absolutely.
We've had so many experiences when the buildings are being renovated that it either will upset the ghosts or bring them about, or sometimes even clear them completely out. But it tends to make them malevolent to change the space that they're, keen and aware of.
So next on our list is something I know really well. I actually wrote a book on it, Paranormal Provincetown. So our next on our list is Provincetown.
Welcome to paradise. Yes, we're in Provincetown, Massachusetts. Known as the spot where the Pilgrims first set foot in the New World in 1620, this quiet fishing village located on the tip of Cape Cod is a popular tourist destination for both the living and the dead. Human monsters once roamed Provincetown's picturesque, sand-swept streets. Our first stop is the Lancey Mansion on Commercial Street. Built by Benjamin Lancey for his mother in the late 1880s, the mansion was designed to emulate a Beacon Hill brownstone. Passers-by have spotted a lady in black who reportedly peeks out of the mansion's cupola. It's the very spot where Lancey propped up his dead mother during the winter as they patiently waited for the cemetery's ground to thaw. And over at the Victoria House on Standish Street is the former home to Provincetown's very own serial killer, Tony Chop Chop Costa. According to reports from the former bed and breakfast, guests would hear disembodied whispers throughout the house and the occasional scream of a female voice emanating from the Costa's old room, Room 4. Some believe that Costa may have tortured his victims in the Victoria House, similar to Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs, before murdering, removing their hearts, and burying them in Truro. Costa was a heartless killer.
So welcome back to 13 Most Haunted Crime Scenes Beyond Boston. Joining me are the ladies from Paranormal Expeditions. I was just telling them that I stayed in that hotel or that bed and breakfast that was a crime scene. Have you ever done that? Have you spent the night in a crime scene?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. One on your list. Yeah, there's several on your list that we've spent the night, the summer, the weekend.
Yeah.
Well, the next on the list is, to me, one of the sadder locations. There's a lot of energy there, which is the Freetown State Forest. So tell me about you shot a documentary. There was True Crime Paranormal, fantastic documentary. And any recent developments with that story?
Actually, I've heard some things with the recent development of them finding and getting closer to testing the DNA and having a little bit more finance go towards that. And from what I heard, it was flat nose. And during our documentary, Tina and I continuously got confirmation that it was flat nose. And we were contacted by the girls. Tina actually has her own experiences out.
Yeah, for sure. Nancy, I think the girl with the bike, she definitely made contact with us numerous times, and the more we went there, the more they kept confirming that they remembered us and that they were safe and that they're just the little clues that they would give us that it was them and they were listening, and it was unbelievable.
When you say they, you mean the ghosts, right?
The ghosts,
yeah,
the spirit of the girls who we were making contact with. It was just such a memorable experience to make such a personal connection with them and that they remembered us.
Well, if you may or may not know, there were multiple murders. There was a lot of satanic activity. There was so much that happened in Freetown State Forest. Have you gone back recently?
We have several times, actually. We go back to pay our respects. We've gone back down to lay down flowers within the sites where bodies were found, or where we've been told by the ghosts that they are currently laid to rest.
Yeah, we've gone back where like the little pond is, where the navigation system did direct us to go. It was all dried up the last time we went, and we actually went in and got some more evidence, which was really great.
So next on our list is, I know very well, is the Gardner Pingree House, which is the murder house in Salem. You ladies know Salem really well. Now, based on your experiences, you feel like that Salem is the most haunted city in New England?
I think it's haunted, enchanted, magical.
In a magical way.
Yeah, it is. It's got that lore. I always tell people when they're close to Salem, roll down your window and smell the air, because it's like no
so
other.
Different.
You smell the magic.
Yeah, I also think it's one of the most, personally, I think it's the most protected places, because you get all these magic shops, and I think there's just a lot of great energy, and a lot of witches know what they're doing.
Right, a lot of awareness there too, you know, of what we do and, you know, how they use their tools in terms of communicating with spirits, you know, within their own shops and homes and restaurants, and, you know, just giving them the respect that they actually deserve, you know, from being people.
They know what they're doing.
Well, the Gardner Pingree House specifically, that's where Captain Joseph White was murdered. He was 82 years old. He was hit over the head. It was a murder for hire. Do you think that murders would psychically imprint itself on a location?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
One of our actual theories as a combined group is that we believe that it leaves a scar in the universe. That these places where DNA is heavily spilled on the ground, it actually leaves an imprint of the individual. Some of it we see as residual, and other times we see intelligent individuals that actually answer us with intelligent time and intelligent response, and we're able to have a conversation with the dead.
Do you, based on your experience, have you been able to solve crimes? I know the Freetown, you guys got some names with Freetown, but able to get names of the potential murderers, say at the Lizzie Borden house or other locations that are crime scenes?
We actually have, yes. We kept getting the name Harper, which was interesting because we surmised that it was a disgruntled employee.
And Lizzie Borden's house?
Yes, and we actually think Abigail Borden could have potentially been a sex victim. A crime victim.
Okay.
So, and the whole entire scene was manipulated by the police themselves to give her the respect that she deserved by pulling her dress back down, putting her shoes back on. So that manipulation of the crime scene did it no justice, because now we have to rely on the dead to come back and tell us what happened. We can't rely on the crime scene.
Well, speaking of crime scene, and these are all crime scenes, but the next one is Orleans Waterfront Inn. In fact, there's a woman, her name's Hannah. She was a prostitute. We don't really know if her name is Hannah or not, but we're going to roll a clip on Orleans Waterfront Inn.
Our third most haunted crime scene, it's Cape Cod's Orleans Waterfront Inn. While researching my latest 13 Most Haunted book, I survived an overnight at the allegedly haunted Orleans Waterfront Inn on July 4th weekend in Cape Cod. Yes, the fireworks happened inside this historic structure. I chose the haunted spot, which is room 5. Not known to me at the time, my bed for the night made a cameo on an episode of Sci-Fi's Ghost Hunters. Built in 1875, the inn became a speakeasy run by the Irish mob, as well as a bordello. There was an unsolved murder on the premises involving a prostitute nicknamed Hannah. She was found dead outside of the inn and is believed to be the resident ghost. Various other apparitions were reported at this location, including 2 workers who committed suicide by hanging, and a naked woman dancing in the lobby. A hotel where guests check in but never check out. They're dying to have you stay.
I also had I interacted with a ghost cat, and I didn't know that the place supposedly had a ghost cat, and the cat was rubbing up against my leg. Have you guys had ghost cat experiences?
Ghost animals. I've seen like a rabbit like dissipate in front of us.
We had Banicula. Banicula. We were, where were we?
I think in Pennsylvania. We were.
And I stopped my car in an effort to stop myself from creaming the animal, and it just disappeared.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, we've captured like dogs on EVPs.
USS Salem, we caught a pig.
Speaking of the USS Salem, that's number 2 on the list, and I moved it up because there's been a lot of energy on that vessel, and it's currently the location for Ghost Ship Harbor, which we're all working on. And okay, so when I talk about everyone's experience, so there was a pig. You picked up an EVP of a pig on the top deck. What else is going on? There's so much to talk about with USS Salem.
Yeah, where do you start?
Where do we begin?
Do you have an
today?
Well, we just feel like throughout the course of time, we started 6 years ago on the USS Salem, and the energy has shifted as the more teams come in and portals are left open and nothing's being closed afterwards. And there's these doorways. Basically, you go there and it's like a revolving door depending on who you're going to catch next.
Yeah.
Some of them are mad, some of them are children.
It's been just like intensifying, I feel like year after year, investigation after investigation, and it's getting like scarier.
Number 2 on our most haunted list is the USS Salem in Quincy. Launched on March 25th, 1947 in Quincy, and nicknamed the Sea Witch by her crew, the USS Salem never saw combat, but certainly was a harbinger of death. In fact, the area beneath the mess hall became a makeshift morgue during the earthquake off the coast of Greece in 1953, and it's estimated that at least 400 dead bodies were kept on the vessel. On board, there's a motley crew of resident ghosts, including the Burning Man, who supposedly smells like death and hides in the berthing area beneath the third mess hall, where the bodies were kept during the Ionian earthquake. There's also a ghost girl who speaks Greek, a salty sea captain, a growling devil dog, a cook who likes to keep the kitchen in order, and a man named John, who reportedly gives tours of the USS Salem in the afterlife.
A lot of bodies brought aboard the ship. A lot of people died on that island, and they brought some bodies on the, into the operating room, and they died. They had to put them in the freezers down below. The CPO mess is, you've heard strange noise coming out of there, and you go in there, there's nobody in there. A couple of years ago at Halloween, some of the girls said that they had scratches, and they were in the wardroom pantry, and they felt they had scratches on them after.
So have you had any experiences with the Greek ghost on this vessel?
Yes, and I'm not going to talk about it. It's my idea. It's something that I want to do and see if, see if somebody has something they want to say. I'm sure with so many souls, someone has to have a message somewhere, that they want to leave.
Welcome back to 13 Most Haunted Crime Scenes Beyond Boston. So the USS Salem, crazy haunted.
Yes.
It went from lower on my list to number 2 on my list. And based on your experiences, what do you guys, they're scratching you. I know, Cassie, you were scratched, right?
Yeah, I got scratched when we were just doing like a small tour, trying to prep for the Ghost Ship Harbor, and you were getting some voices telling you that you shouldn't be there, and then at that same time, I ended up going home with some scratches that were kind of unexplained, and it's the first time I've had an experience like that aboard the ship, and it seems pretty clear that they didn't want me there for one reason or another, so.
Well, my theory with that is, perhaps, because there's a Ouija board in our room, and the thing is, we did not put the Ouija board there, and it's kind of freaks me out, especially because it's so active. We don't need to reach out to the dead, because they're already reaching out to us.
Right, and that's what I was trying to kind of educate people with that were coming on the tours, is that all the doors are open there for communication. They've been opened over the years, and we've all had our own communications with the spirits already there, and there's nothing that will keep you safe even if you're not an investigator. So
my goal is with the season is we can maybe close some doors and maybe get some answers. I think that there's a frustration with the spirits, and maybe it's a communication barrier with the living, and it's also we're taking over their vessel with a haunted attraction. So
I'm not happy about that.
Right.
I wouldn't
You could blame them.
It might be a little bit like territorial, and we're all women, and who are these like buffoons coming on there? But
there's days they ignore us completely. They're like, what? And you can feel the energy. It's just different.
It's too quiet in the air, either there or it's super active, and that's all you really get. And the silence is just a serious activity.
Nice, intense session with all of them, and just kind of make peace and maybe settle them down as well.
I would love that. I think it's needed. So the last location, number 1 on our list, is the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast in Fall River.
So good.
Our number 1 most haunted crime scene is the infamous Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast in Fall River. Although she was tried and acquitted of the gruesome murder at the 1845-era Victorian home, Lizzie Borden never shook her 40 wax claim to fame that she hacked up her father and stepmother on August 4th, 1892. As far as ghosts are concerned, visitors claim to hear sounds of a woman weeping and have spotted a full-bodied apparition wearing Victorian-era clothing dusting the furniture. There are also reports of phantom footsteps storming down the stairs and doors mysteriously opening and closing. Also, guests have heard muffled conversations coming from vacant rooms. Perhaps it's the spirits of Borden and the actual murderer making a post-mortem pact to hide the bloody hatchet. Or maybe it's something more sinister.
So we're going to have more information in my book, 13 Most Haunted Crime Scenes Beyond Boston. This show is going to air on multiple public access stations throughout the region. It went all the way to Vermont, New Jersey, so it's going to air all over. Thank you so much, ladies, and happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
Thank you.